During a light-hearted appearance on Jimmy Fallon, Keanu Reeves drops a long-kept secret about Sandra Bullock that completely changes how fans see their friendship. As he opens up about what really happened on the set of their iconic movie together, the studio falls silent, and Sandra is left both shocked and touched. His confession turns a fun late-night interview into an unexpectedly emotional moment everyone will be talking about. Sometimes the most powerful secrets are not the ones that break people apart, but the ones that could have brought them closer if they'd been shared sooner. This is the story of one late-night show, one silent promise, and the moment Keanu Reeves finally chose to tell the world what Sandra Bullock had done for him. The city outside glowed like a field of stars, but backstage at the Tonight Show, everything felt too bright, too loud, too close. Keanu sat in the narrow hallway outside the green room, elbows on his knees, listening to the muffled roar of the studio audience through the walls. He'd been on 100 talk shows, survived 1,000 stunts, walked through exploding sets and flying glass, but tonight his palms were sweating over something as simple as words. In his jacket pocket, his fingers kept brushing the worn edge of a folded photo from an old movie set, the one secret he'd carried for years. He told himself this was just another scene, except there was no script, and this time the stunt was his heart. A stagehand rushed by with a headset, almost bumping into him, then froze when he realized who he'd nearly collided with. "Sorry, man. Mr. Reeves." Keanu gave the easy half-smile people expected, that soft nod that said, "It's okay, I'm human too." The kid relaxed in an instant, like kindness was a switch someone had just flipped on. Keanu watched him vanish around the corner and wondered how many people out there only knew him as the quiet, nice guy from the memes, not the man whose mistakes and fears kept him awake at night. If they knew what he'd almost lost on the set of Speed, they might understand why tonight mattered so much. Inside the green room, the TV on the wall played the show with a few seconds' delay. Jimmy Fallon was already out there, bouncing with his usual restless energy, making the crowd explode with laughter over some goofy game. Next to the TV, a bouquet of flowers sat in a glass vase, bright, messy, alive. The card tucked inside had 2 words, written in Sandra's familiar, sharp, looping handwriting. "You'll shine." Keanu ran his thumb over the edge of the card, feeling the weight behind those simple words. She didn't know what he was planning to say, only that he'd texted her. "There's something I need to finally admit tonight. On air." Dee replied with a joking voice message about not confessing to a secret marriage, then quietly added, "Whatever it is, I trust you." That trust was exactly what twisted in his chest now, because the secret he was about to reveal didn't make Sandra look bad. It did the opposite. It made her look almost impossibly good. But that was the problem. Sandra had always done kind things like they were breathing, like they were nothing, and she hated being praised for it. She believed real kindness was the stuff no one ever sees. Keanu agreed with her, yet something in him kept whispering that the world needed to see this one just once. Not as gossip, as a reminder. The door opened and Sandra stepped in like her own kind of sunlight, wearing a simple black dress that somehow looked both effortless and carefully chosen. She caught his eyes immediately, reading him in that quick, uncanny way she'd always had. "You look like you're about to jump off a building without a harness," she said, dropping onto the couch beside him. "And I've seen you do that for real, so don't try to tell me you're fine." There was a laugh in her voice, but her eyes were serious, searching. Keanu exhaled, a slow, honest breath, and for a second he almost told her everything right there. Instead, what came out was, "Do you remember the bus scene? The real one, not the polished take they used." Sandra's smile dimmed into something softer, heavier with memory. Of course she remembered. The day the breaks didn't catch in time. The day all the noise and choreography and timing failed, and for one terrifying moment it wasn't a movie, it was real. In his mind, Keanu was back there. The roaring engine, the smell of burned rubber, the asphalt racing under wheels that weren't supposed to be moving that fast. Sandra in the driver's seat, knuckles white on the steering wheel, the stunt crew shouting through headsets, someone yelling, "Cut, cut, cut!" and the bus not listening. He could still feel the violent jolt as the vehicle lurched toward the edge of the unfinished ramp, camera rigs rattling like bones. Instinct had taken over. He'd grabbed for Sandra, bracing his arm in front of her, but she'd done the opposite, twisted her body to shield him instead, shoving him toward the floor as if she could hold back a bus with her own shoulders. The bus had stopped in time. Barely. No one died. The official story turned into a funny, almost went wrong anecdote for interviews. People laughed. They called it movie magic and stunt precision. What no one talked about was the bruise that had bloomed across Sandra's shoulder or the way she'd brushed off the medic, saying, "Check on Keanu first," even though he was unhurt. Dee made the entire crew promise not to talk about who had protected whom. "We were both just scared," she'd said afterward, ice pack pressed to her arm, her voice shaking but stubborn. "It's not a hero story, it's just people trying to keep each other alive." Back in the green room, Keanu watched her now, older but somehow even more radiant, like time had only added layers of courage and compassion. "I remember," she said quietly. "You had that ridiculous hair, and I thought, if I let the bus kill him, I'll never forgive myself for not making him change that haircut first." She laughed, and he did too, grateful for the humor, but the image of her throwing herself sideways still burned behind his eyes. The world knew Sandra Bullock, movie star. Very few people knew Sandra, the woman who would instinctively put her body between a friend and a wall of metal. A knock sounded on the door, sharp and urgent. A production assistant poked her head in, cheeks flushed. "Keanu, Sandra, they're ready for you in 3. Jimmy wants to bring you out together like a mini-speed reunion." Sandra clapped her hands once in mock panic. "Oh no, we're responsible for a bus and an audience now. We've learned nothing." She stood, smoothing the front of her dress, then looked back at Keanu. "Whatever you're about to do out there, just remember it's you. That's enough. You don't have to perform a miracle." He wanted to tell her that for millions of people watching, she already was a miracle. The way she listened. The way she lifted people up quietly, without cameras, without credit. The way she'd text him on random Tuesdays, "Hey, just checking that your heart's okay today." The secret he carried wasn't just about the bus. It was about everything that had followed. The late-night phone calls when his grief felt unbearable. The way she'd shown up to his sister's hospital room without makeup or publicist, armed only with a stack of dumb comedies and a promise to stay as long as it took to make them laugh. They walked together toward the side of the stage, where the curtain hung like a waiting wave of darkness. Through the gap, Keanu could see Jimmy at his desk, already winding up the audience. Behind Jimmy, giant screens flashed through old clips from Speed, the bus jumping the gap, Sandra's younger face framed by wild hair, Keanu's determined eyes. The crowd screamed with nostalgic joy. The energy hit Keanu like a physical force, and the old part of him, the actor, the stuntman, the man who'd learned to run through glass and fire, knew how to ride that wave. But another part, the one holding that folded photo, knew he couldn't just surf over the truth anymore. Jimmy spotted them in the wings and grinned huge, gesturing to the band. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special treat tonight, 2 legends together again." The music blasted, horns and drums and applause rolling like thunder. Sandra squeezed Keanu's hand once, a quick, grounding touch, then let go as they stepped into the blaze of lights. It felt like stepping into another universe. The heat, the cheers, the cameras swinging like curious eyes. Anyone else would think this was the safest place in the world. But to Keanu, it suddenly felt like standing on the edge of that ramp again, the bus skidding forward. No guarantee they'd stop in time. They took their seats on the couch opposite Jimmy, who leaned across the desk, buzzing with excitement. "Look at you two. This is unreal. Keanu, Sandra, people have been begging for this reunion for years." They bantered for a while, trading stories about bad coffee on set, the time Sandra prank filled his trailer with rubber ducks, the day Keanu dared her to do her own small stunt and then panicked when she actually did it. The audience laughed at all the right moments, the way they always did. On the surface, it was just fun, just nostalgia. Underneath, Keanu felt every second ticking closer to the reason he was really there. Jimmy glanced at his notes, then looked up with a mischievous glint. "So, Keanu, we heard a rumor that there's something you've never told Sandra, something from those speed days, and you said you might be ready to share it tonight on national television." The audience reacted instantly, gasps, whistles, a low, excited murmur. Sandra raised an eyebrow, turning toward Keanu with a half-smile that was curious but also guarded. "What did you do?" She asked, trying to keep it light, though he could hear the faint tension in her voice. Keanu felt every camera in the room lock onto him. His heartbeat matched the slow swell of the band, underscoring the moment. For a second, he thought about backing out, making a joke, pretending there was no secret at all. It would be the easier path, the safer stunt. But he remembered a kid online last month, writing about how lonely they felt, how they didn't believe anyone would ever show up for them the way movie characters did for each other. He remembered how close he'd come once to believing that himself, and he knew this wasn't just about him and Sandra anymore. He inhaled, steady and deliberate the way he did before a dangerous sequence. Then he turned to her fully, his voice soft but clear enough to carry through the studio and into a million living rooms. "There's something I've never said about you," he began, eyes locked with hers. "About what really happened that day on the bus." Sandra's smile faltered, confusion and a flicker of fear crossing her face. The audience leaned forward as one, suspended between laughter and silence, not yet sure which way this story would fall. And as the lights burned hotter and Jimmy watched with stunned interest, Keanu finally opened his mouth to tell the truth, knowing that once the words left his lips, nothing between them, or for the people watching, would ever quite be the same again. The studio went quiet the way it does right before a stunt, when everyone knows something could go wrong. Keanu's eyes stayed on Sandra, not on the cameras, not on Jimmy, just on her. "That day on the bus," he said, his voice low but steady. "The one where the brakes didn't catch on time. Everybody talks about how dangerous it looked on screen. But nobody knows it was more dangerous off camera than it was in the movie." A nervous laugh rippled through the audience, then faded when they realized he wasn't joking. On the monitors, the director cut to a close-up of Sandra. Her smile had slipped into something uncertain. "Keanu," she said under her breath, still trying to keep it light, "don't you dare tell them I almost crashed the bus into craft services. I've worked hard to keep that secret buried." Jimmy chuckled on reflex, but Keanu didn't bite. He took a breath, the kind you take before you jump, and went on. "You didn't almost crash anything," he said. "The bus did what buses do. It didn't care that we were actors. It didn't care about marks or cues. It just kept going. And while everyone was yelling, 'Cut,' I realized we weren't stopping." He glanced at the audience, then back to her. "I reached for you, remember? I was going to cover you like in the script. I was supposed to be the hero." His hand echoed the motion in the air, half instinct, half memory. "But before I could, you threw yourself sideways. You used your body to push me down, to shield me. If that bus had gone one more yard, your shoulder would have taken the hit instead of mine." His voice went softer. "You did that without thinking, for me." On screen, the camera lingered on Sandra's face as the realization hit that he was serious. Her eyebrows drew together, the way they did when something cut deeper than she wanted to admit. You could almost see her flipping through her memories, landing on the smell of rubber, the metal vibrating under their feet, The way she'd woken up the next morning with a bruise so big she joked it deserved its own trailer. She'd always told that story as clumsy comedy. Keanu was now telling it as something else. "Keanu," she protested quietly, a faint blush touching her cheeks. "It was instinct. Anyone would have done that." He shook his head. "No, not anyone. You." His gaze stayed gentle, but the words had weight. "And it wasn't just that day. After I lost people in my life, when things got really dark, I thought about quitting everything. Movies, Hollywood, all of it." The audience hushed even more. A different kind of silence fell, that careful, respectful kind. "You used to call just to make sure I'd eaten, to send ridiculous memes. You sat with my sister in the hospital and never told a single camera you'd been there. You didn't treat me like Keanu Reeves, the actor. You treated me like a human being who might fall apart if someone didn't knock on the door now and then." Sandra's eyes were shining now, but not with stage lights. She shifted on the couch, torn between embarrassment and something like gratitude. Jimmy sat back, almost forgotten, his expression softening into genuine awe. On social media, phones were already up, the moment being captured from 100 angles, some people holding their breath without realizing it. Keanu reached into his pocket, fingers closing around the folded photo. "I've carried this around for years," he said. "The day after that bus scare, the stunt photographer caught this behind-the-scenes shot." He unfolded the picture and held it out so she and the nearest camera could see. The audience squinted at the big screen behind the stage as the image appeared. Sandra half-turned, arm outstretched, body angled protectively over him, her face caught in a raw, unguarded split second of fear and determination. It was messy, unglamorous, real. For a heartbeat, nobody spoke. Sandra stared at the photo like she was looking at a stranger who just happened to be her. "You kept that?" she whispered. "Yeah," he said, "because that's you. Not the awards, not the red carpets, that. The person who throws herself between people and danger, between people and loneliness, without ever asking to be thanked. I wouldn't still be here doing this if you hadn't done that, more than once." He paused, choosing the next words with painful care. "I thought the world should know who you are when the cameras aren't supposed to be rolling." The studio erupted, but it wasn't the usual late-night laughter or shallow applause. It was something deeper, almost protective. People rose to their feet, clapping for Sandra, some shouting her name, others just standing there with their hands pressed together like they were grateful for something they couldn't fully explain. Jimmy looked between them, his eyes glassy. "Wow," he said finally, his joking tone dropping away. I did not see that coming." Sandra's jaw clenched as she tried to swallow the emotion. She turned to Keanu, her voice a mix of affection and reproach. "You're not supposed to do this," she murmured. "You're not supposed to put my secret good deeds on blast. That's not the deal." He gave a half smile. "Someone once told me real kindness is what you do when nobody's looking. I agree. But sometimes people need to see it, to believe it exists, to remember they can do it too." The crowd roared their agreement, and for a moment Sandra let herself smile through the tears, bowing her head in a tiny surrender. But under the applause, she quietly said something only he and the closest microphones could catch. "You still don't know everything about that day, Keanu." He frowned, confused. "I thought I was the one with the secret." She shook her head slowly, a shadow of old fear crossing her features. "You told them what I did. You still don't know what it cost me afterward." Her hand tightened on the arm of the couch, the knuckles pale. "And you definitely don't know the one thing I begged you for that you never realized you ignored." The audience, still cheering, couldn't hear the tremor in her words, but Keanu did. His chest tightened with a new kind of dread, the uneasy sense that in trying to honor her, he might have torn open something she'd spent years carefully stitching closed. The cameras zoomed in on their faces. capturing the exact moment the gratitude on her smile began to fracture into something more complicated, something that hinted at a wound he hadn't known was still bleeding. And somewhere beyond the bright circle of the stage lights, millions of viewers watching at home leaned closer to their screens, suddenly aware that this wasn't just a sweet story about kindness anymore. It was the start of a reckoning neither of them had planned for. The clip hit the internet before the show even finished taping. By the time the second commercial break ended, "Thank You Sandra" was already trending worldwide. In living rooms and bedrooms, on crowded subways, and in quiet hospital waiting areas, people watched Keanu's trembling confession and Sandra's stunned reaction on tiny screens, replaying the moment she saw the photo, the way her fingers had trembled when she reached for it. Comment sections filled with stories. "My friend did this for me. My mom was like this. I thought nobody cared like that anymore." For a few brief hours, the world felt a little softer. But backstage, the air was anything but soft. The minute the cameras cut for the final commercial and the band started playing the outro, Sandra rose from the couch with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. She hugged Jimmy quickly, thanked the crew with professional warmth, and started toward the hallway at a pace that was calm to anyone else. But to Keanu, who knew her stride, looked a lot like escape. He excused himself from a producer trying to hand him a schedule and followed. The neon buzz of the studio gave way to the dimmer, humming corridors where cables ran like black veins along the floor. "Sandra," he called gently. She didn't slow. Only when he said her name again, more firmly, did she stop outside the green room door, her shoulders rising and falling once before she turned. Up close, without the flattering wash of stage lights, the fatigue in her eyes was clearer. "That was a lot," she said, forcing a little laugh. "Even for you." He searched her face, confused and guilty. "Did I hurt you? I wanted to thank you, to show people that I'm secretly a superhero." She cut in, not cruelly, but with an edge that sliced just the same. "Keanu, you know I hate this. You know I do things quietly for a reason." "Yeah, but you also tell people to use their voice when it matters," he replied, gentler now, trying to meet her where she was. "Tonight, it felt like it mattered. People needed a real story." She blew out a breath, pacing a small circle in the narrow hallway before facing him again. Her fingers fiddled with a ring, twisting it around and around. "You don't get it," she said softly. "You told them what I did. You didn't tell them what happened after. You didn't ask." He frowned, reaching back through years of memory. "You were fine," he said, and even as he spoke it, he heard how shallow it sounded. "You finished the shoot. You joked about the bruise. You scared the stunt coordinator by popping your own shoulder back into place." "Yeah," she interrupted, eyes flashing. "And then I went home and spent months waking up in the middle of the night because I'd dreamt I'd killed you. I stopped driving for almost a year. I wouldn't get on buses, even regular ones, without checking the brakes myself like a crazy person. Every time we shot a scene with cars or explosions, I could feel my whole body tighten like it was waiting for the next thing I couldn't control." She swallowed hard, looking away down the empty hall. "You healed." "I kept pretending I had." The confession hung between them, heavier than the stage lights ever could be. Keanu's stomach dropped. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. A small, bitter smile crossed her lips. "I tried," she said. "Once." She leaned back against the wall, eyes locked on some point far beyond it, clearly replaying a moment he couldn't yet see. "You came by my trailer a few days after the scare, remember? You brought coffee and some stupid pastry with too much sugar, like that was going to fix my shoulder. I told you I kept seeing the scene when I closed my eyes, that I was more scared than I'd thought I'd be. You hugged me, called me tougher than all the stunt guys, and then you had to run to do another setup. You were dealing with so much of your own stuff back then. I could see it in your eyes. I decided you didn't need mine too." Something inside his chest twisted hard. He remembered that day. He remembered being grateful she was still there, still cracking jokes, because he'd been holding himself together with duct tape and sarcasm. He remembered promising himself he'd check on her more, and then the movie had blown up, and so had their schedules, and somewhere in the middle of the chaos, his promise had quietly slipped through the cracks. "I thought you were invincible," he said, the confession rough with regret. "You were always the strong one, the one making everyone else laugh. I didn't realize you were afraid." She looked at him then, really looked, the anger in her gaze softening into something more vulnerable. "That's the problem," she replied. "Everybody loves the strong one until they need to fall apart, and then people don't know where to put them." Inside the green room, through the half-open door, the TV played muted footage of their own interview on delay. On screen, Keanu was holding up the photo. Sandra was choking back tears. The audience was on their feet. Out here, the real scene was happening. Two people standing in a fluorescent-lit hallway, trying to fill in years of silence with a few shattered sentences. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not just for tonight, for then, for not seeing you were hurting, for not asking again when you tried to tell me." The words felt inadequate, but they were all he had. "I thought I owed you a thank you. Turns out I owed you an apology first." She let that sit for a moment, measuring its truth. Then she sighed, shoulders sagging, some of the fight leaving her. "You're forgiven," she said quietly. "Mostly." A wry smile tugged at her mouth. "You still hijacked my secret good deed for international consumption. That's at least one cocktail of guilt you're buying me later." He smiled, relieved, but the relief was fragile. "Deal," he said. "I'll spend the rest of my life buying you guilt cocktails." She laughed, a softer sound this time, and they stood there in a small pocket of peace. For a heartbeat, it felt like they'd patched the tear. But then her gaze flicked past him, to the TV showing the viral moment again, and the peace shifted into something else, something almost like resolve. "You know what scares me more than that bus now?" she asked. "What?" he said. "The idea that people will watch that clip and think kindness is some huge, cinematic gesture, like it has to be dramatic or dangerous to matter." Her eyes locked on his, intense again. "They'll wait for a runaway bus. They'll forget they can just show up. Text a friend, sit with someone in a waiting room. Pay attention when the strong one says, 'Hey, I'm scared.'" He followed her gaze to the screen, watching his own speech in silence. "So we fix it," he said. "We tell the rest of the story, not just how you saved me, how we almost lost each other by not talking, how kindness isn't just one big moment, it's all the small ones afterward when it would be easier to walk away." She studied him again, something dawning slowly in her eyes, an idea dangerous and promising all at once. "You really want to do that?" she asked. "Because if we do, we can't just say the pretty parts. We'd have to be honest, about the times we failed, about the ways we disappeared on each other." Her voice dropped. "About why we never really tried to be in each other's lives the way we both maybe wanted to." The last words hung there like a live wire, humming with a different kind of electricity. For years, rumors had swirled about them. Were they ever together? Did they ever like each other that way? They'd always laughed it off for the cameras, smiling like it was a fun what if. Now in this cramped hallway, Sandra had just cracked that door open for real. Keanu felt his heartbeat in his throat. "Maybe that's the real secret," he said slowly. "Not just what you did for me, what I never had the courage to do for you." Her breath caught, barely audible, but he heard it. For a fleeting moment, neither of them moved, the air charged with all the unsent messages, the unmade phone calls, the years of almost. Somewhere down the hall, a stagehand shouted for someone, a door slammed, life continued its noisy march. Sandra straightened, pushing off the wall, covering the tremor in her hands with a practiced flick of her hair. "If you're going to start telling those secrets," she said, her tone light but her eyes anything but, "you'd better be very sure. Because that's not just your story or mine, that's both of ours. And once we say it out loud, we can't go back to pretending we never felt it." He opened his mouth, the truth pressing hard against his ribs, desperate to finally be spoken. For the first time in a very long time, Keanu Reeves, stuntman, action star, king of controlled danger, felt genuinely unsure if he was brave enough. Before he could decide, a producer hurried up, breathless. "Guys, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but the network wants a quick follow-up statement. The clip's exploding. They'd love a short video from you together, just a thank you for the fans, maybe a word on kindness. 2 minutes, tops." Sandra and Keanu exchanged a look, the weight of their unspoken history pressing between them. They had a choice: keep the story neat and shiny for the cameras, or risk everything by telling the messy, complicated truth about love, fear, and the courage it takes to actually show up for someone. Sandra raised an eyebrow at him, a question and a challenge in one. "So," she murmured, low enough that only he could hear, "how brave are you really, Reeves?" And with the world waiting just outside the door, still applauding a story they thought was complete, he realized the next words he chose wouldn't just change a talk show segment. They might finally decide whether he and Sandra remained a beautiful movie memory or became something far more dangerous and far more real.